Thank you so much, Dara Torres, for being with me today on the WaveCapital's guest speaker series on relationship building in a team environment. You're my 107th guest. How are you today?
How come I wasn't first?
If I would have met you before I started my podcast, you would have been.
Okay. I'm doing good. I'm doing good, thanks. Just dealing with Boston weather, but I'm doing pretty well. And we're in our off season right now. I coach Boston College men's and women's swim teams. So we're in our off season, so things are a little bit more chill. So it's kind of nice.
And it's a beautiful city. My wife and I were in Boston in late 2024. It's such a beautiful city, a lot to do, a lot of history, and the weather was pretty good for October.
That's good. Yeah. Well, this is April and it's like 40 and raining. So
And like any city, you take the good with the bad in terms of the weather. You're a 12-time Olympic medalist. You have 4 gold, 4 silver, and 4 bronze. You're a mom. You won your first medal back in 1984, and you won your last medal in 2008. So a span of 24 years. And you're also, as you had mentioned, you head up the men's and women's swim and diving teams at Boston College. You're also an entrepreneur, an investor. You're a New York Times best selling author. So would love to talk to you today about what relationship building means to you and what has it meant for your professional career and what inspired you to want to pursue an early career as an Olympian and what it meant for you to win these medals. And each one, I'm sure, was challenging at times. There's a lot of discipline, a lot of sacrifice, being a mom too, having to really find that work-life balance, preparing in the off season and getting ready for competition. So would love to hear about your incredible journey with respect to relationship building. How would you define it?
I mean, when I got into swimming, it wasn't like, oh, I'm getting into swimming because of the Olympics. I just fell in love with the sport. I did other sports too growing up, like soccer. And, I tried all these other sports. And I don't know, it's just something about being in the pool and swimming. And it's kind of quiet when you're in there, but yet you're with a whole bunch of other kids and having fun and just fell in love with the sport. So once I started to become a better swimmer, that's when I started to think about the Olympics. I made my first nationals at 13 and broke my first world record at 15. And that's when I really was like, okay, I want to try for the Olympic Games. The problem was that my best event wasn't an Olympic sport, which was the 50 freestyle. Now it is, and it became an event in 88. But when I was the world record holder, it wasn't in the Olympic Games. So I ended up making a relay, and it was awesome. Every Olympics was different. Every Olympics, had its challenge. I think my first one, because I was so green and didn't know what to expect and never swam in front of 10,000 people before, and, never really was walking around an Olympic Village with Michael Jordan and Mary Lou Retton and all these Carl Lewis and all these crazy athletes. It was hard to kind of focus and almost kind of forgetting that I was there too as an Olympian instead of being in awe of everyone else. So that was something I kind of had to get used to. And, like I said, each Olympics was different. It was in different environments, different stages of my life. Probably my most favorite would be Beijing. And not because I won silver medals, because I won gold and others, but more so just because I had my daughter and I was older. And like we said, there was a span between 24 years and I was doing something no one had ever done before. And, just the challenge of that was very exciting to me.
Absolutely. And, when you think about the stages of your career, personally and professionally speaking, and how they both intertwine, it is a mental exercise as well as a physical toll because you have to mentally be prepared. Obviously, you can get your body physically in shape to compete in the Olympics, but you have to be mentally on point to be able to take either criticism. There's a lot of excitement, a lot of expectation that goes into competing, and you want to give your best in every competition. And would love to know what type of person you were in terms of preparation and how were you able to prepare for these various competitions to the point where you had to also counsel yourself and be good to yourself that hey, my best is going to be as good as it can be. And it's not always going to be 100%. But if you put forth the effort, the result will be there. So, would love to know how you really prepared for all these competitions and who were your early mentors and role models to help you chart a really strategic and clear path for you to know, okay, I'm gaining all of these early experiences and I'm achieving incredible success. You mentioned at 13 and 15 years old. So you knew that your passion was aligned with the vision of where you wanted to go, but who were the people who were instrumental in helping you get there?
Well, first of all, I'm never satisfied achieving my best. I think that's what always kept me going is I was never satisfied. So it's always 100% effort, like no matter what, no matter how bad you swim or how great you swim, it's always 100% effort. I think for me growing up, I didn't have one particular role model. I loved Pat Riley and how he coached. I love, Jill Sturkle, who was 13 in the 76 Olympic Games and was sort of someone I looked up to because I swam her at the same events and the way she handled the other athletes and was so put everyone first before her, and there's just something amazing about her. And then there's, someone like Michael Jordan who just keeps going and going and going. And so there was never one particular athlete. It's just like I took things from different athletes and that I really admired. So yeah, that's kind of how I was inspired. But like I said, you're never satisfied. And so like in '08, for example, like losing by a hundredth of a second in my race and getting a silver medal, I was beating myself up. And the one thing I do have to realize is that if you leave no stones unturned and you've done everything that you possibly can to be the best that you can be, you have to be okay with whatever the result is.
And that is how anyone, no matter who they are, no matter what their profession is, because you also have to think about applying the same principles, not only for yourself, but how people could perceive you, applying that knowledge and knowing if they're a spectator or they're one of your teammates or they're one of your coaches, that you're going to interpret your success, you're going to interpret the results the way you're going to perceive them, but someone else might perceive them differently. And where you're hard on yourself, that's where someone can come in and put his or her arm around your shoulder and say, "Hey, you did the best you could, to your point, in your words, leaving no stone unturned." And you need that counsel, you need that support, you need that perspective, because sometimes you can't shoulder the burden or the hard truth of the fact that, hey, I missed out on the gold medal by a very small margin. But at the end of the day, to win silver three times at the age of 41, I mean, that is no small feat whatsoever. And you could answer this question much better than I could, but how many people at the age of 41 are winning silver medals at the Olympics? You are in a special class where people can't look to you and say, "Oh, she should have done better. You did extraordinarily well." So what for you were the motivating factors in getting yourself mentally prepared at that age to compete in the Olympics? And what in your mind were you trying to either convince yourself or prove to yourself that I want to be able to, as a mom, I still want to be able to compete into my 40s?
When you go through something, for me personally, and I think most elite athletes won't take what other people say and go, it's okay. Like if you left no stones unturned, I think as an elite athlete, you have to figure that out yourself because you're the one who put all the hard work in and sacrificed and dedicated yourself to swimming hours and hours and hours and doing all the dry land training and everything just for that. Like my event was 24 seconds long, So my mom or whoever could be like, "Oh, you gave it your all." No, like I had to come to that conclusion. It took me a little while. Like it took a 17-hour plane ride home from Beijing to stop beating myself up and realize there's really nothing I could have done. So I think it's a little different for someone who is like type A or is always striving and never satisfied, that they're the ones that have to come to that conclusion that happens, with them. But as far as like getting mentally ready, I set goals, I do at the beginning of when I make a comeback or, beginning of a season, I just set goals and I'm self-motivating. I can't have other people like, oh, like and cheer you on or whatever. It's like I have to be self-motivated. And I'm the one who's sacrificing and getting up at 6 a.m. and eating the way I'm supposed to eat and trying to manage being a mom and doing my training and trying not to feel guilty and then going to meets and like trying to get everything together, like that's on me. And again, everyone's different, but for me, it really was just like going out there and doing the training, but and just enjoying it and kind of taking it in and knowing that you're doing something that no one's ever done before. And to me, like that was the challenge for me. That's what motivated me was, my age and people always talking about it and oh, is she really doing this? And how can she do this? She's too old. And that kind of stuff like lit a fire under me. So I try to take the negatives of what people say and turn it into a positive.
Of course. And you speak of Michael Jordan and There's a picture of me and MJ above my right shoulder, and I met him in 2005 at the 2005 Hoopty Celebrity Golf Classic that his friend Fred Whitfield headed up for many years, and he and Fred ran the Charlotte Hornets for many years before Michael sold his majority interest in the team. But now you see Michael dominating in NASCAR with Tyler Reddick, which is such incredible, incredible driving. And that's why I brought up MJ, because he's quoted saying that anytime there's a negative, he would always perceive that negative by turning it into a positive. So there was never any negative, right? And
Yeah.
you mentioned turning a negative into a positive because you also went through a lot of setbacks and challenges along the way and obstacles, and you were able to really come back strong and resilient, and you were able to face adversity. But I've said in the past, and I know many people have said it in their own way, but dealing with pressure builds character, and you have a lot of character. It shows in your body of work, not only as an Olympian, but as a mom, as a head swimming and diving coach for the men's and women's teams at Boston College, as a New York Times bestselling author, a motivational speaker, an entrepreneur, an investor. So, where you are today, sitting and talking with me on my podcast, you wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for your character and how you have faced adversity. So, for my audience and me at home, how are you able to deal with that adversity? Were you able to have it within yourself to find a solution, or were there other people you turned to help you find solutions?
I mean, I've had so many adversities, so I don't know which one to like choose. But I think the hardest thing probably was when I made my comeback for '08, and people were saying, well, there's no way that she could do it being that old. She must be like taking drugs or doing something. And imagine putting your heart and soul into something your whole entire life and then someone doubting it or saying that you're not doing it the right way. Like that was a very hard pill for me to swallow. I didn't even think people were thinking that. And then the faster I got, the more the chit chat like started to go. And so I went to the USADA and which is the US anti-doping agency. And we did some extensive drug testing and they took like 38 vials of blood and like tested me throughout my whole training and stuff. And, just to prove, not to myself, because I knew I wasn't doing anything, but just to prove if anything ever came up that, look, I was doing it the right way. But just the constant talking of that and being in the press and they're talking about on PTI and one's negative, one's positive. And there's just so much stuff going on that I had to kind of like tune out and turn it off. And what I came to realize is just really the people who know me is who I really care most about that know I'm doing it the right way. Like there's always going to be naysayers, there's always going to be people trying to tear you down and stuff. And it's too bad that people waste their energy on that. But I didn't want to waste my energy worrying about what other people were saying. I did at first, but I had to kind of tune out and not put my energy there and put it towards my daughter and my training.
That's a great way to look at it, and taking on criticism head on and not shying away from it, but rising above it.
Mhm.
And when I think about someone like you who been in competition your whole life, not only as an Olympian, but as a human being, and we all have faced trials and tribulations as human beings, and we've all have a story that is continuing to be written. Each and every one of us has a story, has a journey, has a past, present, and will have a future. And we all have families, we all have professions, we all have a place in society where we want to feel the most fulfilled and that we're giving back and that we're living purposeful lives. At least people like you and me who are very driven and very motivated. And for someone like me, I'm also somebody who sometimes I could be my toughest critic because I want to do the best I can do and I want to be the best I can be and I want to always live up to my fullest potential. And so I admire you and what you've been able to accomplish in your career because not everybody can say that they're 12-time Olympic medalist. And it is so impressive to be in the position you're in because you can impress upon your wisdom and knowledge and insight on others who are younger than you and who look up to the young people who you lead at Boston College. And so many people who, like me, want to interview you on his or her respective podcast because it's invaluable knowledge and information that is what I am so excited to learn about, as well as my audience to learn about. And I wanted to ask you about what, in your mind, was your toughest competition? What was your most gratifying win? or what was your most heartbreaking loss and how did you bounce back from that moment? Because you learn more in defeat than you do with success. And I know that you mentioned 2008 Olympics in Beijing and, winning silver opposed to gold, but would love to talk to you about any other competitions that come to mind, most gratifying win and most heartbreaking loss.
I mean, I've just have to go back to '08. I'm sorry, but it's like, if you think about having the most gratifying win of a silver medal at 41 and with a 24-year gap between my first Olympics and last Olympics and having a child and, trying to do something no one's ever done before, but yet so dissatisfying because I lost by 1/100th of a second. And what happened after that is I basically had to get out of the pool. NBC got one question to ask me. That was it. I had 30 minutes to get the question asked, go warm down, go to the medal ceremony, and then get back in the ready room where you walk out on deck with the relay, and I had to anchor a relay. And I remember I was warming down, I was on my back doing backstroke, and my coach was like waving at me, and I was acting like I didn't see him. And he's like looking at me, and finally I'm like, what? And I'm trying to warm down. And he's like, get that race out of your head. I'm like, what? He's like, stop thinking about that race. You have three other girls relying on you to anchor this relay, and you need to get that race out of your head. You can think about it all you want when you're done, but get that race out of your head. And he was right. And so I finished my warm down, went and got my medal, and then went and walked out with the team to swim the relay and to anchor it. I ended up doing the fastest split ever on that relay in the world. So he was right. And it was nice to have that little guidance to be like, okay, yeah, you're mad, but get over it and you can be mad later or whatever. So I learned a lot, even at 41. And I know you said pick another Olympics, but I learned so much at those Olympic Games, and I think that that is probably my worst and favorite race.
Well, and you won your first medal in 1984. And so when you think back to that time, and I had Nancy Lieberman on my podcast, I know you know Nancy, and she won a silver medal. Michael Jordan has won two gold
They're in
medals.
team sports. They have to rely on everyone else. Individual is different because it's just you. And so I don't know, I think it might even be harder for a team sport because you have so many people you're relying on. And with swimming, it's up to you. And so I actually feel for people who are in team sports.
So you feel that team sports are harder than individual because where individual you can control everything you
Yes.
do, where team sports you have to rely on other people. Did you ever feel, say, I wonder how I would have done if I had to be in a team sport?
No, I played a year of volleyball in college. I had another year of eligibility, so I decided to play volleyball. And I mean, I love team sports. I love the camaraderie and stuff. But if someone's having an off day, like I'm sure Michael Jordan wasn't thrilled he got a silver medal. I think that when you're that competitive to be in a team sport and someone's off or something's going on, I mean, you're not mad at them, but you're mad that you don't have control over the situation. And I'm sure like any elite athlete probably feels that.
Sure. And who are your favorite teammates in the Olympics? I know that there are a number of others who you look to for either advice or you look to him or her as a confidant, someone you can share experiences with. Who were the people you felt close to?
I think probably in '08, like each year was different and you're really with your swimming mates, but you have to remember that you swim against these kids all year round, then you come together for, 2 to 4 weeks and then you don't see them again. So it's not like you're with them all the time and you keep those friendships. I mean, I obviously have some friendships from all the Olympics I've been in, but I have to say probably Jason Kidd. On one of the night days that the prelims was over, a few of the basketball guys came on the bus with us to go back to the Olympic Village in Beijing. And just the way he talks to his peers and his teammates, and there's just something about him that I don't know. I wish I could be coached by him. He just, I don't know. And I see him on the court, and that's someone who I don't talk to often or whatever, but who I really admire. And I reached out to him when I was deciding to become a coach. And, he talked to me a little bit about it and put me in touch with a couple people here. But I just really admire him a lot.
Growing up, I was a big fan of the NBA, and Jason Kidd was one of my favorite NBA players to watch as an NBA fan. Are there any other athletes, could be current athletes or athletes from the past? I could call this person up and ask for advice or ask, could you make a introduction for me because I'm interested in this position or I'm interested in learning more about this area to gain more expertise in this area?
Probably coaches. One of my good friends is Tony La Russa, and sometimes I'll call him up, especially also when I was thinking about becoming a coach. And he had always said, you should coach or whatever. And his philosophy and watching him manage teams, and it's fun. I mean, he has an event a year that he brings out like coaches and stuff. I remember one, it was Bobby Knight and Joe Torre. There were like all these coaches out there, and it was just me, I wasn't a coach yet. And I had no intention of being a coach. So I just was listening to them and just their philosophies and stuff. And it was just so cool to hear from a different perspective, not just an athlete, but like the coach's perspective. So that was really a lot of fun to be able to kind of be around that environment and stuff.
That's awesome. One of my former colleagues has been friends with Joe Torre for years, and he's a board member on Joe Torre's Safe at Home Foundation. And you mentioned Tony La Russa. He's from the Tampa Bay area, like me, and he's one of the big names come out of Tampa in terms of Major League Baseball. I interviewed Joe Madden on my podcast, who won the 2016 World Series with the Chicago Cubs, and he managed the Rays for 8 years, even when they were the Devil Rays. But those are nice list of coaches, and I love how you also mentioned Pat Riley too. I had Kim Stone on my podcast, and she worked for the Miami Heat organization for many years and reached a level of executive vice president. She also is a former general manager of the Chase Center. She helped open up the Chase Center for the Golden State Warriors out in California. And now she's a CEO of the Washington Spirit women's soccer team. So I love how when I interview my guests and they're mentioning names, I can, draw some connections amongst my guests. And that's why I love talking to people about relationship building and team environment, because we're all about relationship building as human beings. We want to build those relationships. We want to foster them. We want to grow them. We want to develop them, really truly cultivate them, because throughout our lives, if you look at it as a continuum where we're progressing as people, throughout our lives, that we want to be able to think fondly of the people who have impacted our lives, and how if it wasn't for this person or that person, we wouldn't be here today. There's always somebody you can point to and say, if it wasn't for this person, I wouldn't be here today. So I love the fact that you speak about these incredible individuals like yourself. And you mentioned Pat Riley. What did you like about Pat Riley when you looked to him for advice? Was it his messages or the way he coaches players, or, what stood out to you?
I've only met him a couple times, but you hear like there was one time I was around and he was giving a speech, and there was just the leadership. He's just such a great leader, both on the court and in the corporate office. And to me, I was never a follower. I always wanted to be a leader. And so hearing different stories and stuff from someone like Pat Riley is amazing. I mean, he did give me one bit of advice. I asked him, how does he slick his hair back? And he gave me the stuff that he slicks his hair back, and I've been using it ever since. So he really did, but that's just a joke. But just really leadership. I admire people who are in leadership roles, and like coaches and teachers and people who can manage a lot of different personalities. And I'm learning that too in my position. I have 50 different personalities I'm dealing with everyone has an issue or something going on. And it's not easy. It can be tiring at times, but if there's any way you can make an indelible like impact on someone when they come out of your program, like that's very satisfying.
Absolutely. And I had Rex Walters on my podcast too, and he played for Pat Riley, and he's a former University of Kansas college basketball star who played for Hall of Famer Roy Williams and then went on to have an NBA career. And I had interviewed Rex, and he actually was an assistant coach in recent years for the Charlotte Hornets, and that was Michael Jordan's team when Michael Jordan was still the majority owner. When you think about the Olympics, was it everything that you thought it would be? The expectations, the gravity of the arena, being in the pool and being a swimmer and just feeding off of that energy and feeding off of that competition. Was it everything that you thought it would be? The weight of the moment, being in that arena?
I think in my first Olympics, I didn't really soak it in, I guess you can say. I mean, I was 17 years old, and 3 months earlier was 16. So I was young and, like I said, kind of in awe of everyone else and couldn't really appreciate it. And I remember by the time '08 rolled around, I remember walking into the arena and some fog or smog or something got into the roof. And we walked in, and this was our first time coming into the arena at Beijing, and everyone was like, "Oh, what's that?" And I took a step back. I'm like, "God, it's really great to be here." And so it's so much different through the eyes of a 17-year-old than it is through the eyes of a 41-year-old. And I just was so appreciative. I was going around thanking the workers that were there that probably had no idea what I was saying and I was speaking English. But you just appreciate things more as you get older. And I wish I could have had that appreciation when I was younger too. So definitely as I got older, like from probably Sydney, Australia in 2000 and 2008, I could really understand like the magnitude of going to Olympic Games. I think before it was just like, oh, whatever, let's go. But it was a lot different as I got older, for sure.
And your favorite city visiting as an
Sydney.
Olympian? Sydney. I thought you were gonna say Beijing.
No, no, Sydney. I know I'm kind of stuck on Beijing here, aren't I? But that's also the most recent. I remember, like, I'm old, so my memories back from '84 is a long time ago.
What did you like about Sydney?
Just the harbor and the way they took the Olympics so seriously. They did an incredible job, all the different venues. The swimmers are like rock stars out there. Like those are their big athletes. And so everyone knew who all the swimmers were from different countries when we got there. And they just treated us so well. And they speak English, which is nice. So it was easy to figure out where to go and what to do and just kind of navigate, when you go into town and stuff. So yeah, I'd have to say it's just a gorgeous Sydney, Australia is just gorgeous. So
Absolutely. Well, that's a great answer. My wife and I would love to visit Australia one day. I hear it's such a beautiful country, and you're another person who has told us how amazing it is. And I love history, and I've always had an appreciation for all the different countries around the world and the cultures and the food and the architecture and just the way of life. And it's just amazing how for someone like you as an Olympian, your sole purpose is to compete and your sole purpose is to win gold medals. But if you're take a step back and soak it all in, to your point, you want to also soak in the moment of being in a city that you're not from and that you've never been to before.
yeah.
And so it gives you a greater appreciation because life outside of America does exist and there's so much the world has to offer outside of our country. So it is amazing that you have those experiences and that you carry them for the rest of your life. When you think about speaking at corporations with respect to giving motivational talks and relating or taking your experiences and what you've learned and your successes and your failures and how to think of a compelling story or message to really share with Fortune 500 CEOs or executives who look to you for your wisdom and your knowledge about how maybe they can run their companies a different way or how they could be more productive or how they can work better with respect to perhaps relationship building in a team environment. Were your experiences as an Olympian, how did they translate to these speaking engagements? What was your approach, and was your approach different depending on which company you were talking to?
No, I think what I realize as I give motivational talks is that even though I'm a swimmer and my story is my story, there are so many things that have happened in my life that people can relate to. So if I just get up there and talk my story and tell the experiences and stuff that I've had, I don't go up there and give stats or do anything like that. I just tell my story. And I believe from what I've been told with my talks that there's always someone who can relate to something in my story. I mean, my speeches are usually 45 minutes. So, again, I've lived a long life and I've had a lot of stories. And so, the way I tell a story is to hopefully not only be able to relate to that person, but also to motivate them on how I got through something. So, that's kind of how I approach it. I mean, there are certain companies that may want to talk about team building or something like get into the relays and stuff like that. Or there's other ones that want to talk about motivation. So I have to talk about how I was at 17 and how I kind of became who I am at 41. And so there's definitely different topics that they want, but it's always my story. So, and I find that people can relate much better when you tell a story rather than just to read something.
Of course. And was there ever a mission statement with a particular company that resonated with you, or because you've given so many talks, there's not one particular one?
Yeah, there's not. I mean, normally I won't take a talk if it's a company I don't believe in. So I've had some that I've turned down, but for the most part, like they always will come to an athlete or an Olympian because they have something going on that they need motivation.
Of course. And what do you love most about being a mom? And, we talked about figuring out the best work life balance. What worked best for you? And how much does it mean to you that you could share those experiences within your family?
The hardest thing for me when I became a mom was to be able to balance being a mom and doing what I love to do. And so I really look to working parents out there as my motivation because how do they go to work and not feel guilty that they're leaving like their kids at home if they're not in school yet and stuff when they're so young. And so those type of parents that were able to figure out a balance that would work both for their child and for themselves was my motivation because I was really feeling guilty at first when I decided to, make a comeback. And my daughter was so young. She, was 4 months old or 5 months old, something like that, when I decided to make a comeback. So she was really young and I had extreme guilt with that. But, I realized that what I'm doing, hopefully I can share with her one day and she can understand why I did this and that it's okay to do what you love to do and also be the best parent that you can be. And so that kind of got me through the working parents out there and realizing that like this is life. And, I've been lucky enough to share my journey with my daughter and I think for the longest time we didn't talk about anything. And then when she like, I guess people started to know who I was, her friends' parents would ask her stuff and she's like, wait, you have this or you've done, and she didn't even know like a lot about it because I was just waiting until she got a little bit older. But I think it's kind of cool because there are things in her life that she can relate to with things that happen in my life. And it's fun to be able to share that with your child, I guess, your journeys and stuff.
And sharing with the men and women at Boston College, I would imagine.
Yes. Yeah. I try not to do too much because, I don't want the eyes rolling or, I think they get fascinated by stories if they know like who I know or who I've hung out with or, whatever. But I don't know. It's funny because I think at first they thought that I was coaching them the way or training them the way that I was coached and trained. I'm thinking to myself, you wouldn't want that like the way I was trained. There's no way. So I think they learned very quickly that I like to think outside the box, but I also every workout will never be the same. It's always different. And I never look back on what we did. I always move forward and go off how everyone's doing there. And yeah, they sometimes like if we're on a bus ride, they're like, okay, so like who do you know? Who's in your phone book? So I'll give them like one name or something. They're like, no way. So but that's what they like is like who I know.
Well, I want to thank you for your time today. And I know that you're at home and you have to take care of your
My dogs, yeah. I can hear them barking downstairs.
no worries. And my family and we love animals. So we certainly understand. I'm so glad that we were able to make this interview work. And next time my family and I are in Boston, I'll certainly reach out to you. And any final words, 20, 30 seconds, any final words of wisdom about relationship building before we depart from our interview?
I think listening is really important. I've learned, through coaching that sometimes I'll be a little reactive and instead of just taking a step and letting them vent or tell me what's going on or whatever. And I think that's something that I'm still working on. It's just who I am in general. I'm just a reactive person. I wear my heart on my sleeve. And so I've been able a little bit, to step back, but I also like my associate head coach will be like, okay, Dara, like, don't do it yet. Just wait, sit on it, sleep on it, whatever, And so that's something that I'm learning. And there's a lot I'm learning. I don't think giving the workouts is the hardest part of it. I think it's the relationship that you have with the athletes and them trusting you and, being able to understand them and understand that each person, each athlete's an individual and you have to coach them as an individual, not as a group.
Excellent words of wisdom. And I love that you mentioned listening. You're one of now, I believe, 3 or 4 guests who, in final words, before we depart from our interview question, I always ask, listening has come up, and future Hall of Fame baseball manager Joe Madden also said listening. So, and there are a couple others on my podcast. So I love that listening has been a common theme because I truly believe that too, that listening is essential. And it's a very important quality that people don't think much about, but they should definitely pay more attention to what other people are saying. So I want to thank you again, Dara Torres, for being my 107th guest. It's an honor and a privilege to interview you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I look forward to staying in touch. 12th time Olympic medalist, 4 gold, 4 silver, and 4 bronze. Congratulations on a lifetime of success.
Thank you so much. You take care.
Thank you. You take care as well.